respected, before you chase one more person who walked away, before you send one more message hoping they'll finally understand your worth, hear this truth. Sometimes the greatest lesson love can teach is found in silence. Because the longer someone lives without the person who truly loved them, the heavier time becomes. And by the time they realize what they lost, time has already broken something inside them. There is something about human nature that very few people truly understand. We are creatures of habit. We adapt so quickly to blessings that we start treating them like ordinary things. We wake up expecting the sun to rise. We breathe without thinking. And sometimes we become so comfortable with the people who love us that we stop noticing the value they bring into our lives. That's where the biggest mistake begins. I've seen people walk away from incredible relationships believing they could always come back later. They thought the person waiting at home would always answer the phone. They believed those warm good morning messages would never stop. They assumed those patient conversations, those quiet sacrifices, those forgiving hearts would always be there, but life doesn't work like that. Time has a way of educating people when words fail. You see, when someone leaves your life, your first instinct is often to fight. You want to explain yourself one more time. You want to remind them how much you've done. You want to prove your value. You want them to understand your pain immediately. But here's something I learned after watching countless relationships rise and fall. People rarely appreciate what they still have in their hands. Value is often discovered in absence. Think about your favorite song. Imagine hearing it every minute of every day. Eventually, even that beautiful melody would become background noise. But stop listening to it for 6 months. Then one day, it unexpectedly starts playing while you're driving alone. Suddenly, every lyric means something again. People are no different. Sometimes your absence becomes the conversation they refused to have while you were standing in front of them. Now let me tell you about a man named Michael. Michael was successful by every standard the world celebrates. Nice house, expensive car, career everyone admired, people respected him, friends envied him. But success has a dangerous side. It can quietly convince you that you're always right. His wife, Emily, loved him with everything she had. She celebrated every promotion before he even celebrated himself. She waited for him during late nights at work. She remembered birthdays for his family. She cooked meals after working her own exhausting job. She believed in his dreams even during the seasons when nobody else did. But slowly something changed. Michael stopped saying thank you. Not because he was a bad man, because comfort had replaced gratitude. Every sacrifice Emily made became expected instead of appreciated. Every act of kindness became routine instead of remarkable. When she cried, he assumed she'd get over it. When she became quiet, he called her emotional. When she asked for attention, he promised he'd do better next week. But next week kept becoming next month. Then one ordinary morning, Emily looked at herself in the bathroom mirror and asked a heartbreaking question. When did I become invisible? That question changes lives because nobody leaves the relationship the day they pack their bags. They leave emotionally long before they leave physically. Every ignored conversation becomes another step toward the exit. Every broken promise becomes another brick in the wall. Every moment of feeling unseen slowly convinces a loving heart that staying hurts more than leaving. Michael never noticed, not because he couldn't, because he never imagined she would actually leave. But then one afternoon she did. No screaming, no dramatic scene, no revenge. She simply packed what belonged to her, left a short note wishing him peace, and walked away. At first, Michael felt something unexpected, relief. He thought maybe space would fix everything. He convinced himself she was overreacting. He believed she'd call within a few days. His friends even encouraged his confidence. She'll come back. Women always cool off. It's her time. So he did. The first week felt almost exciting. No conversations about emotions, no compromises, no responsibilities outside of work. Freedom seemed attractive until silence started talking. He came home one evening and realized nobody asked how his day went. Nobody reminded him to eat. Nobody laughed at his terrible jokes. Nobody filled the empty chair across the dinner table. The house wasn't peaceful. It was lonely. But pride is a stubborn companion. Instead of admitting he missed her, he distracted himself. More work, more nights out, more scrolling, more pretending. That's what many people do. They don't heal, they hide. But time has incredible patience. It waits until the noise disappears. Then it introduces people to the truth they spent months avoiding. Months later, Michael found one of Emily's old sweaters tucked behind a closet shelf. He held it for just a moment. Her perfume had almost disappeared. Almost. That tiny remaining scent carried years of memories back into the room. Their first apartment, road trips with no destination, late night conversations about dreams, holding each other after difficult days. Suddenly, he wasn't remembering arguments, he was remembering love. Isn't that interesting? Time has a strange way of removing the ego and leaving only the truth. The little things we once criticized become the very things we desperately miss. Her questions, her laughter, even the way she reminded him to lock the front door. The habits he once found annoying became treasures he could no longer reach. That's when regret quietly entered his life. Not with fireworks, not with drama, just a heavy realization. I should have listened. But here's what many people don't understand. Regret grows in silence. It doesn't arrive overnight. Every sunrise without the right person adds another layer. Every holiday feels different. Every achievement feels incomplete. Every difficult day becomes harder because the one person who believed in you isn't there anymore. That's why time is such a powerful teacher. It doesn't argue. It doesn't shout. It simply keeps moving. And while it moves, it slowly reveals what really mattered. If you're listening today because someone walked away from you, don't spend every moment trying to interrupt the lesson time is preparing for them. You cannot force appreciation. You cannot convince someone to value what they take for granted. You cannot beg another human being into seeing your worth. Real understanding doesn't come from your speeches. It comes from their experience. Sometimes they need to sit alone at the dinner table. Sometimes they need to celebrate a birthday without hearing your voice. Sometimes they need to face life's storms without the person who always stood beside them. Not because you're trying to punish them, because reality teaches lessons that emotions cannot. And while time is working on them, it should also be working on you. Too many people spend their entire lives watching someone else's clock. Has he realized yet? Does she miss me? Will they come back? Those questions keep your heart trapped in yesterday. Instead, ask yourself something better. Who am I becoming while time is changing both of us? Because here's the beautiful part nobody talks about. The person who chooses growth instead of revenge becomes impossible to replace. When you heal, when you rebuild your confidence, when you rediscover your purpose, when your happiness no longer depends on someone else's attention, you become the person you were always meant to be. And whether they return or not, you win. Because your life is no longer waiting for someone else's decision. That's real freedom. That's real strength. That's the kind of peace no breakup can steal. The hardest truth about love is not that people leave. The hardest truth is that many people don't understand what they had until life forces them to live without it. You know, there's an old saying that experience is the greatest teacher. I believe that with all my heart because people can hear advice 1,000 times and still ignore it. They can read books about relationships. They can watch videos. Friends can warn them. Family can beg them to wake up. But until life puts them in a position where they personally feel the emptiness they created, those lessons remain nothing more than words. That's why time is so powerful. Time doesn't lecture. Time demonstrates. Imagine carrying a beautiful watch every single day. At first you admire it, you clean it carefully, you protect it. Then, after months of wearing it, you stop noticing it altogether. One day you misplace it. Suddenly, every room becomes a search. Every drawer gets opened. Every pocket is checked. The value didn't increase because the watch changed. Its value increased because your access to it disappeared. Relationships often follow the same painful pattern. People don't always lose love because there wasn't enough of it. Sometimes they lose love because they became blind to it, and blindness has nothing to do with your eyes. It has everything to do with your heart. I remember hearing about a young woman named Sophia. She wasn't asking for expensive vacations. She wasn't demanding luxury. She wasn't asking for perfection. All she wanted was to feel chosen every day, not once a year, not only after an argument, every day. She used to wait by the window when her husband David came home from work. At first, he'd smile the moment he saw her. He'd hurry inside just to hug her. They'd laugh while making dinner together. They'd stay awake until midnight, talking about dreams that hadn't happened yet. But years passed. The hugs became shorter. The conversations became smaller. The appreciation became quieter. David convinced himself that because she stayed, she was happy. Never assume silence means satisfaction. Some people stop complaining because they're at peace. Others stop complaining because they've lost hope. There's a difference, a huge difference. One evening, Sophia prepared David's favorite meal. Candles on the table, soft music playing in the background. She wanted one evening where they could simply reconnect. David walked in. He looked at the table, then looked at his phone. "I'm exhausted," he said. "Can we do this another night?" Another night, 3 simple words. He didn't realize those words sounded familiar because she'd been hearing them for years. Another weekend, another vacation, another conversation, another promise, another chance. Eventually, another time becomes never. Sophia smiled politely, cleaned the table alone, and went to bed before he even noticed she was crying. Now, here's something people often misunderstand. The strongest people don't always leave after the biggest betrayal. Sometimes they leave after the smallest disappointment repeated 1,000 times. One drop of water doesn't break a stone. Years of dripping water does. The same is true with neglect. It's rarely one argument that destroys a relationship. It's accumulated loneliness. It's feeling alone while sitting next to someone you love. That's one of the loneliest places in the world. Months later, Sophia made a decision, and not because she stopped loving David, because she finally started loving herself enough to stop accepting less than she deserved. When she walked away, David reacted exactly the way many people do. He thought it was temporary. He believed emotions would settle. He assumed familiarity would bring her back. But familiarity wasn't enough anymore. She had already spent years choosing him. Now she was finally choosing peace. At first, David filled every empty moment with distractions. He bought new furniture, started new hobbies, worked longer hours, went out with friends more often, everything except sitting quietly with himself, because silence is uncomfortable for people running from truth. Then came Sunday morning. He woke up naturally around 8. The house was perfectly clean, perfectly organized, perfectly silent. He walked into the kitchen expecting coffee. Nobody was there. He opened the refrigerator and realized he hadn't even bought groceries. For the first time in years, he understood how many invisible things Sophia had done every single day. Love often hides inside ordinary moments. Folding clothes, remembering birthdays, checking if you arrived safely, saving the last slice of cake because it's your favorite. These little acts rarely receive applause, but remove them from someone's life and suddenly every day feels different. David wasn't missing grand romantic gestures. He was missing the 1,000 tiny expressions of love he never thanked her for. You see, appreciation should never arrive after absence. It should exist during presence. But human beings have a dangerous habit. We think tomorrow is guaranteed. We'll apologize tomorrow. We'll compliment them tomorrow. We'll spend more time together tomorrow. We'll fix things tomorrow. Then one day tomorrow disappears. I want you to hear this carefully. If someone walked away from your life because they repeatedly felt unseen, don't assume they stopped loving you. Sometimes people leave while still carrying enormous love in their hearts. They simply realize love alone cannot survive without respect, without effort, without consistency, without emotional safety. Love is like a beautiful garden. You don't water it once and expect flowers forever. You care for it every single day. The same applies to relationships. Attention isn't something you give once. It's something you choose repeatedly. And when that choice disappears, distance quietly begins growing. Now maybe you're the one who left. Maybe you exhausted yourself trying to explain your pain. Maybe you spent months asking for honesty, affection, kindness, patience. Maybe every conversation ended with promises but no change. If that's your story, understand something. Walking away doesn't always mean giving up. Sometimes it's the bravest act of self-respect you'll ever make, because staying somewhere that slowly destroys your spirit isn't loyalty, it's self-abandonment. There's an incredible difference. You were never created to spend your life convincing someone to see your worth. The right people won't need endless persuasion. They'll recognize your value while you're still standing beside them. And if they don't, time often finishes the conversation you could never win. I've watched proud people eventually whisper apologies they once swore they'd never say. I've seen confident people sit alone wondering why success suddenly felt empty. I've seen hearts that once ignored love desperately searching for the very person they believed would always be there. Not because someone cursed them, because life removed the comfort they misunderstood as ordinary. That's the quiet power of absence. It doesn't scream, it reveals. It strips away distractions until all that's left is truth. And truth has a remarkable way of arriving exactly when pride runs out. But here's where your story must become different. Don't make your life about waiting for someone else's realization. Don't pause your healing hoping they'll eventually understand. Don't measure your future by whether they regret the past. Because while they're learning their lesson, your life is still moving forward. Every sunrise gives you another opportunity to become wiser, stronger, kinder, healthier, more peaceful. Imagine meeting the future version of yourself 5 years from now. Would that version thank you for spending every day checking your phone? Would they thank you for refusing new opportunities because you were waiting for an old chapter to reopen? Or would they wish you had trusted life sooner? Growth begins the moment you stop asking, why did they leave? And start asking, what is this season preparing me for? That question changes everything, because every painful goodbye carries the possibility of a stronger hello if you're willing to let time heal you instead of harden you. The beautiful irony is this: the more you rebuild your own life with purpose, dignity, and joy, the less you need anyone to come back to prove your worth. And that's often the very moment your light becomes impossible to ignore. There comes a moment in every person's life when the noise finally disappears, the phone stops ringing, the excuses stop working, the distractions lose their power, the parties end, the laughter fades. The busy schedule no longer hides the empty places in the heart, and when that moment arrives, a person is left with only two companions: time and truth. Those are the two companions no one can escape. I've often said that life has a remarkable way of humbling every one of us. It doesn't matter how successful you become. It doesn't matter how attractive you are, how much money you earn, or how many people admire you. At some point, life places you in a quiet room where your achievements cannot comfort you. In that room, your heart begins asking questions your ego refused to answer. Why wasn't I more patient? Why didn't I listen? Why did I think they would always stay? Those questions don't come from weakness. They come from awakening. Unfortunately, awakening often arrives after opportunity has already walked away. There was an older gentleman named Robert who once shared a story that stayed with me for years. He had been married for nearly 30 years. His wife, Grace, was the kind of woman who remembered everything. She remembered birthdays, anniversaries, favorite meals, the names of neighbors' children, and the dreams Robert mentioned only once years earlier. She was the quiet foundation of their family. Not loud, not demanding, just faithful. Every evening she waited for Robert to come home. She'd ask about his day, make dinner, and sit beside him while he watched television. Sometimes she simply wanted to hold his hand. Robert loved her. He truly did. But somewhere along the journey, he stopped showing it. He assumed she already knew. He believed love didn't need to be spoken because they had been together so long. One afternoon, Grace looked at him and softly asked, "Do you still see me?" Robert laughed. "What kind of question is that? We've been married almost 30 years. She smiled gently. "That's not what I asked." He didn't answer. He changed the subject. He thought the conversation was over. For Grace, it wasn't. You see, every unanswered emotional question leaves a small wound. One wound heals, 1,000 wounds become distant. Years later, Grace became seriously ill. Robert spent every day beside her hospital bed. He whispered words he should have spoken years earlier. He held her hand longer than he ever had before. He thanked her for every sacrifice. He apologized for every missed opportunity. One evening, she smiled weakly and said something that changed his life forever. I never wanted perfect, Robert. I just wanted present. Present. One word, one lesson. Not expensive gifts, not impossible promises. Presence, real attention, real listening, real appreciation. Grace passed away a few weeks later. Robert told me that his biggest regret wasn't working long hours. It wasn't chasing success. It wasn't making mistakes. His greatest regret was believing there would always be another tomorrow to love her better. That's what time teaches. Tomorrow is a gift, not a guarantee. Now, maybe you're wondering what this has to do with someone who walked away from you. Everything. Because the person who left doesn't instantly understand what they've lost. Understanding unfolds slowly. It's like watching the seasons change. You don't notice autumn arriving in a single afternoon. One leaf falls, then another, then another. Eventually, the entire tree looks different. Regret works exactly the same way. At first, they enjoy the freedom. Then certain places remind them of you. A restaurant, a favorite song, a familiar street, the smell of coffee, a holiday, a random photograph. Small memories begin collecting like autumn leaves. Now, they don't seem heavy individually. Together, they become impossible to ignore. That's why you don't have to chase anyone's realization. Life already knows how to remind people, not through punishment, through memory. Memory is one of the strongest forces ever created. It has a way of knocking on your heart without warning. A simple melody can carry someone back 10 years. An old text message can bring tears to eyes that haven't cried in months. A familiar laugh across a crowded room can make someone realize what they've been missing all along. But here's where many people make a heartbreaking mistake. They confuse someone's regret with genuine transformation. Those aren't the same thing. Missing you doesn't automatically mean they've changed. Feeling lonely doesn't automatically mean they've grown. Wanting you back doesn't automatically mean they'll treat you differently. That's why wisdom is so important. If someone returns, don't only listen to their words. Watch their consistency, watch their humility, watch their actions when life becomes inconvenient. Real change isn't loud, it's steady. It shows up day after day. Anyone can make promises when they're afraid of losing you. Character is revealed after they've regained your trust. That's why healing is so important. When you heal, you stop accepting apologies without evidence. You stop confusing attention with commitment. You stop believing potential is the same as reality. Healing sharpens your vision. Instead of asking, do they love me? You begin asking, do they consistently choose me? That's a completely different question. Love is beautiful. Choice is powerful. Because real love chooses. It chooses honesty when lying would be easier. It chooses patience during disagreement. It chooses kindness after disappointment. It chooses loyalty when temptation appears. Choice is what keeps love alive. Without choice, feelings fade. Now let me tell you about another story. There was a young man named Ethan who spent 2 years trying to win back the woman he loved. Flowers, letters, long messages, unexpected visits. He tried everything. Nothing worked. One day, his grandfather sat beside him on an old wooden porch. The old man didn't criticize him. He simply asked, "Son, what are you becoming while you're trying to become enough for someone else?" Ethan didn't answer. His grandfather smiled. "You spent 2 years chasing one person's attention while neglecting the man you're supposed to become." Those words landed deep. Instead of sending another message, Ethan made a different decision. He started reading. He exercised every morning. He repaired broken friendships. He volunteered at a local community center. He prayed more. He laughed more. He forgave more. Little by little, the sadness stopped defining him. Months became years. His confidence returned, not because someone came back, but because he rediscovered himself. Then something unexpected happened. The woman who left reached out. She told him she'd been thinking about him constantly. She admitted she'd never found the peace she expected after leaving. She apologized sincerely. Years earlier, Ethan would have immediately run back, but now something inside him had changed. He wasn't angry. He wasn't bitter. He simply wasn't desperate anymore. For the first time, he could make a decision based on wisdom instead of loneliness. That's what healing gives you. Freedom, not freedom from love, freedom from fear. Fear makes people settle. Fear convinces people that losing someone means losing everything. But healing reminds you that your identity was never created by another person's acceptance. Your value didn't begin when they loved you. It doesn't end if they leave. That's why time isn't only working on them, time is working on you. It's teaching patience where there was panic, peace where there was anxiety, confidence where there was insecurity, purpose where there was confusion. One day you'll wake up and realize you smiled before thinking about them. You'll laugh without forcing it. You'll make plans without wondering whether they'll be part of them. You'll look in the mirror and recognize someone stronger than the person heartbreak first introduced. And in that moment, you'll understand something beautiful. The greatest victory was never making them regret losing you. The greatest victory was refusing to lose yourself after they left one day without you even realizing it. You'll wake up and notice something has changed. The weight you carried every morning won't feel as heavy. The memories that once brought tears will begin to bring wisdom. The questions that kept you awake at night will slowly lose their power, not because the past suddenly disappeared, but because you finally stopped allowing it to control your future. That's the miracle of time. People often think time only changes the person who walked away. No. Time changes everyone. The difference is this. The person who chooses growth becomes stronger. The person who refuses to grow becomes trapped inside yesterday. That's why two people can experience the exact same heartbreak and arrive at completely different destinations. One becomes wiser, the other becomes bitter. One learns to love with healthier boundaries. The other spends years blaming the world. The pain was the same, the decision was different. And every decision shapes a destiny. Imagine standing beside a river. You can't stop the water from flowing. You can't force it to return upstream. Life is exactly the same. No matter how desperately you try to hold on to yesterday, tomorrow keeps coming. So the question isn't whether time will move. It will. The question is whether you'll move with it. Too many beautiful souls spend years standing on the shore of old memories, hoping someone will swim back to them. Meanwhile, life keeps whispering, there is still so much waiting for you. Never become so loyal to your pain that you ignore your possibilities. Heartbreak is a chapter. It was never meant to become the entire book. I've met people who believed their story ended when one relationship failed. 5 years later, they couldn't imagine their life without the blessings that arrived because they kept moving. Sometimes the closed door you cried over protected you from a room that was too small for your future. Sometimes a goodbye that shattered your heart became the beginning of the life you were always meant to live. You just couldn't see it through your tears. That's why faith matters. Faith isn't pretending pain doesn't exist. Faith is believing purpose still exists in the middle of pain. It's believing that every disappointment carries a lesson. Every delay carries preparation. Every ending carries the seed of a new beginning. Now let me share one final story. There was a woman named Hannah. She spent nearly 7 years loving a man who never fully appreciated her. Whenever she talked about her dreams, he'd change the subject. Whenever she succeeded, he'd congratulate her for a moment before making the conversation about himself. Whenever she needed emotional support, he was always too busy. Yet Hannah stayed. Not because she lacked intelligence, because hope kept whispering that maybe tomorrow would be different. Hope is beautiful. But hope without wisdom becomes captivity. One evening, after another broken promise, Hannah quietly packed a small suitcase. She didn't leave with hatred. She left with dignity. As she closed the front door, she cried the entire drive home. People think walking away from someone you love feels powerful. Sometimes it feels heartbreaking. Sometimes doing the right thing hurts more than staying, but temporary pain often protects permanent peace. Months passed, then years. Hannah rebuilt her life piece by piece. She returned to school. She started a small business. She traveled with friends. She discovered hobbies she had forgotten she loved. Most importantly, she learned to enjoy her own company. That may be one of the greatest victories any person can experience. When your peace no longer depends on someone else's presence, you become emotionally free. Meanwhile, the man she left continued believing she would eventually return. He dated other people, he stayed busy. He convinced himself he had made the right choice. Until one ordinary afternoon, he happened to see Hannah from across the street. She was laughing, not pretending, not forcing it, really laughing. There was a quiet confidence about her. She no longer carried the sadness he remembered. She looked lighter, healthier, alive. For the first time, he realized something painful. The woman he thought would always wait had built a beautiful life without him. That realization hit harder than any argument ever could. He called her. She answered kindly. He apologized sincerely. He admitted he had taken her love for granted. He confessed that every passing year had shown him just how much she had done for him. Then he asked the question he had rehearsed 100 times. Is there another chance? Hannah paused, not because she wanted revenge, not because she wanted to make him suffer. She paused because she had become someone different. She smiled gently and said, I truly forgive you. But the woman who begged to be loved doesn't live here anymore. What a powerful sentence. The woman who begged to be loved doesn't live here anymore. That wasn't arrogance. That was healing. Healing changes your address, not where you live, where your heart lives. You stop living in fear. You stop living in desperation. You stop living in constant anxiety about whether someone chooses you. Instead, you begin living from a place of peace. And peace is attractive in ways appearance can never be. Here's something many people never understand until it's too late. The greatest consequence of taking someone for granted isn't that they leave. It's that they eventually become happy without you. Not because they stopped caring, because they finally started caring for themselves. And when someone truly discovers their worth, they stop negotiating it. So if you're waiting for someone to realize your value, don't waste your life staring at the clock. Let time do what time has always done. Let it reveal, let it teach, let it humble. But while time is speaking to them, let it also transform you. Read the books you've been putting off, strengthen your body, protect your mind, deepen your faith, reconnect with your family, laugh with your friends, chase the dream you've postponed for far too long. Become so committed to your own growth that your future becomes more exciting than your past. Because here's the truth, whether they come back or not, your life must keep expanding. If they return as a changed person and your path aligns once again, you'll be able to choose from wisdom instead of loneliness. If they never return, you'll still have built a life filled with purpose, joy, and self-respect. Either way, you win. Never believe that your story ends because one person failed to recognize your worth. The right chapter doesn't begin when someone finally regrets losing you. It begins the moment you stop measuring your value by their opinion. That's when confidence is born. That's when peace becomes permanent. That's when your heart finally understands that real love never requires you to abandon yourself just to keep someone else. So let time break the pride that refused to appreciate you. Let time uncover the truth they couldn't see while comfort blinded them. But don't spend your days waiting for their pain. Spend your days building your purpose. Because in the end, the greatest revenge isn't making someone suffer. The greatest victory is becoming the kind of person who no longer needs revenge at all. Life has a